Good morning, guys. Welcome to chapter 19 and 20 in The Giver. I hope you're enjoying this book as much as I am. I do want to preface the chapter I'm about to read as a very sad one. In this chapter, and I also want to say you do not have to listen to this if you don't want to. In this chapter, Jonas learns what release means. And he learns it in a sad way, but it's part of the story. So, like I said, you don't have to listen to this. If you would like to, hopefully your teacher has talked to you about chapter 19 before you are clicking on this read aloud link. Okay, here we go, chapter 19. Jonas glanced at the clock. There was so much work to be done always that he and the giver seldom simply sat and talked the way they just had. I'm sorry that I wasted so much of your time with my questions, Jonas said. I was only asking about release because my father is releasing a new child today, a twin. He has to select one and then release the other. They do it by weight. Jonas glanced at the clock. Actually, I suppose he's already finished. I think it was this morning. The giver's face took on a solemn look. I wish they wouldn't do that, he said quietly, almost to himself. Well, they can't have two identical people running around. Think how confusing that would be, Jonas chuckled. I wish I could watch, he added, as an afterthought. He liked the thought of seeing his father perform the ceremony, making the little twin clean and comfy. His father was such a gentle man. You can watch, the giver said. No, Jonas told him. They never let children watch. It's very private. Jonas, the giver told him, I know that you read your training instructions very carefully. Don't you remember that you're allowed to ask anyone anything? Jonas nodded. Yes, but Jonas, when you and I have finished our time together, you will be the new receiver. You can read the books. You'll have the memories. You have access to everything. It's part of your training. If you want to watch a release, you simply have to ask. Jonas shrugged. Well, maybe I will then, but it's too late for this one. I'm sure it was this morning. The giver told him then something he had not known. All private ceremonies are recorded. They're in the hall of closed records. Do you want to see this morning's release? Jonas hesitated. He was afraid that his father wouldn't like it if he watched something so private. I think you should, the giver told him firmly. All right, then, Jonas said, tell me how. The giver rose from the chair, went to the speaker on the wall and clicked the switch from off to on. The voice spoke immediately. Yes, receiver, how may I help you? I would like to see this morning's release of the twin. One moment, receiver. Thank you for your instructions. Jonas watched the video screen above the row of switches. Its blank face began to flicker with zigzag lines, and then some numbers appeared, followed by the date and time. He was astonished and delighted that this was available to him, and surprised that he had not known it was an option. Suddenly, he could see a small, windowless room, empty except for a bed, a table with some equipment on it, and Jonas recognized a scale. He had seen them before when he'd been doing volunteer work at the nurturing center. And a cupboard. He could see pale carpeting on the floor. It's just an ordinary room, he commented. I thought maybe they'd have it like in a big auditorium so that everybody could come and all the old go to the ceremonies of release, but I suppose that when it's just a newborn, they don't. Shh, the giver said, his eyes on the screen. Jonas's father, wearing his nurturing uniform, entered the room, cradling a tiny new child wrapped in a soft blanket in his arms. A uniformed woman followed through the door, carrying a second new child wrapped in a similar blanket. That's my father, Jonas found himself whispering, as if he might wake the little ones if he spoke aloud. And the other nurturer is his assistant. She's still in training, but she'll be finished soon. The two nurturers unwrapped the blankets and laid the identical newborns on the bed. They were naked, and Jonas could see that they were both males. He watched, fascinated, as his father gently lifted one and then the other onto the scale and weighed both of them. He heard his father laugh. Good, his father said to the woman. I thought for a moment that they might be both exactly the same. Then we'd have a problem. But this one, he handed one after rewrapping it to his assistant, is 6 pounds even, so you can clean him up and dress him and take him over to the center. The woman took the new child and left through the door as she entered. Jonas watched as his father bent over the squirming new child on the bed. And you, little guy, you're only 5 pounds 10 ounces. You're a shrimp. That's the special voice he uses with Gabriel, Jonas remarked, smiling. Watch, the giver said. Now he cleans him up and makes him comfy, Jonas said. He told me. Be quiet, Jonas, the giver commanded in some strange voice. Watch. Obediently, Jonas concentrated on the screen, waiting for what would happen next. He was especially curious about the ceremony part. His father turned and opened the cupboard. He took out a syringe and a small bottle, and very carefully he inserted the needle into the bottle and began to fill the syringe with a clear liquid. Jonas winced sympathetically. He had forgotten that new children had to get shots. He hated shots himself, though he knew that they were necessary. To his surprise, his father began very carefully to direct the needle into the top of the new child's forehead, puncturing the place where his fragile skin pulsed. The newborn squirmed and wailed faintly. Why, Shh! The giver said sharply. His father was talking, and Jonas realized that he was hearing the answer to the question he had started to ask. Still, in the special voice, his father was saying, I know it hurts, little guy, but I have to use a vein, and the veins in your arms are still too teeny-weeny. And he pushed the plunger very slowly, injecting the liquid into the scalp vein until the syringe was empty. All done. That wasn't so bad, was it? Jonas heard his father say cheerfully. He turned aside and dropped the syringe into the waste receptacle. Now he cleans him up and makes him all comfy, Jonas said to himself, aware that the giver didn't want him to talk during the little ceremony. As he continued to watch, the new child, no longer crying, moved his arms and legs in a jerking motion, and then he went limp. His head fell to his side, his eyes half open, and then he was still. With an odd, shocked feeling, Jonas recognized the gestures and posture and expression. They were familiar. He had seen them before, but he couldn't remember where. Jonas stared at the screen, waiting for something to happen, but nothing did. The little twin just laid motionless, and his father was putting things away, folding the blanket, closing the cupboard. And once again, as he had on the playing field, he felt that choking sensation. Once again, he saw the face of the light-haired, bloodied soldier as life left his eyes, and the memory came back. He killed it! My father killed it! Jonas said to himself, stunned at what he was realizing. He continued to stare at the screen numbly. His father tidied the room, and then he picked up a small carton that lay waiting on the floor, set it on the bed, and lifted the limp body into it. He placed the lid on tightly. He picked up the carton, carried it to the other side of the room, opened a small door in the wall, and Jonas could see the darkness behind the door. It seemed to be the same sort of chute into which trash was deposited at school. His father loaded the carton containing the body into the chute and gave it a shove. Bye-bye, little guy, Jonas heard his father say before he left the room. And then the screen went blank. The giver turned to him quite calmly. He related, when the speaker notified me that Rosemary had applied for release, they turned on the tape to show me the process. There she was, my last glimpse of that beautiful child waiting. They brought in the syringe, asked her to roll up her sleeve. You suggested, Jonas, that perhaps she wasn't brave enough? I don't know about bravery, what it is, what it means. I don't know that I do know that I sat here numb with horror, wretched with helplessness, and I listened as Rosemary told them that she would prefer to inject herself. And then she did so. I didn't watch. I had to look away. The giver turned to him. Well, there you are, Jonas. You were wondering about release, he said in a bitter voice. Jonas felt a ripping sensation inside of himself, the feeling of terrible pain clawing its way to emerge in a cry. So that's what release is. All right. So this next chapter isn't nearly as sad. But now Jonas knows. Chapter 20. I won't go home. You cannot make me, Jonas sobbed and shouted and pounded the bed with his fists. Sit up, Jonas, the giver told him firmly. Jonas obeyed him. Weeping, shuddering, he sat on the edge of the bed. He would not look at the giver. You may stay here tonight. I want to talk to you, but you must be quiet now. When I notify your family unit, no one must hear you cry. Jonas looked up wildly. No one heard that little twin cry either. No one but my father. And he collapsed in sobs again. The giver waited silently. Finally, Jonas was able to make himself quiet, and he sat huddled, his shoulders shaking. The giver went to the wall speaker and clicked the switch to on. Yes, receiver, how may I help you? Notify the new receiver's family unit that he will be staying with me tonight for additional training. I will take care of that, sir. Thank you for your instructions, the voice said. I will take care of that, sir. Jonas mimicked in a cruel, sarcastic voice. I will do whatever you like, sir. I will kill people, sir. Old people, small, newborn people. I'd be happy to kill them. Thank you for your instructions, sir. How may I help you? He just couldn't stop. The giver grasped his shoulders firmly, and Jonas fell silent and stared at him. Listen to me, Jonas. They can't help it. They know nothing. You said that to me once before. I said it because it's true. It's the way they live. It's the life that was created for them. It's the same that you would have if you hadn't been chosen as my successor. But he lied to me, Jonas wept. It's what he was told to do, and he knows nothing else. What about you? Do you lie to me? Jonas almost spat the question at the giver. I am empowered to lie, but I have never lied to you. Jonas stared at him. Release is always like that for people who break the rules 3 times? For the old? Do they kill the old too? Yes, it's true. And what about Fiona? She loves the old. She's in training to care for them. Does she know yet? What will she do when she finds out? How will she feel? Jonas brushed wetness from his face with the back of one hand. Fiona is already being trained in the fine art of release, the giver told him. She's very efficient at her work, your red-haired friend. Feelings are not a part of the life that she's learned. Jonas wrapped his arms around himself and rocked his own body back and forth. What should I do? I can't go back. I can't. The giver stood up. First, I will order our evening meal. Then we will eat. Jonas found himself using the nasty, sarcastic voice again. Then we'll have to share our feelings. The giver gave a rueful, anguished, empty laugh. Jonas, you and I are the only ones in the community who actually have feelings. We've been sharing them now for almost a year. I'm sorry, giver, Jonas said miserably. I don't mean to be so hateful, not to you. The giver rubbed Jonas's hunched shoulders, and after we eat, he went on, we'll make a plan. Jonas looked up, puzzled. A plan for what? There's nothing we can do. It's always been this way, before me, before you, before the ones who came before you, back and back and back. His voice trailed the familiar phrase. Jonas, the giver said after a moment, it's true that it has been this way for what seems like forever, but the memories tell us it hasn't always been this way. People felt things once. You and I have been a part of it, so we know. We know that they once felt things like pride and sorrow and love, Jonas added, remembering that the family scene that had so affected him. And pain, he thought again of the soldier. The worst part of holding memories is not the pain. It's the loneliness of it. Memories need to be shared. I've started to share them with you, Jonas said, trying to cheer him. That's true, and having you here with me over the past year has made me realize that things must change. For years I've felt that they should, but it seems so hopeless. Now, for the first time, I think there might be a way, the giver said slowly. And you brought it to my attention, barely, he glanced at the clock, 2 hours ago. And Jonas watched him and listened. It was late at night now. They had talked and talked and talked. Jonas sat wrapped in a robe belonging to the giver, the long robe that only the elders wore. It was possible what they had planned, barely possible. If it failed, they would very likely be killed. But what did that matter? If he stayed, his life was no longer worth living. Yes, he told the giver, I'll do it. I think I can do it. I'll try anyway, but I want you to come with me. The giver shook his head. Jonas, he said, the community has depended all these generations back and back and back on a resident receiver to hold their memories for them. I've turned over many of them to you in the past year, and I can't take them back. There's no way for me to get them back if I've given them. So if you escape, once you are gone, and Jonas, you know that you can never return. Jonas nodded solemnly. It was the terrifying part. Yes, he said, I know, but if you come with me, the giver shook his head and made a gesture to silence him. He continued, if you get away, if you get beyond, if you get to elsewhere, it will mean that the community has to bear the burden themselves of the memories you have been holding for them. I think that they can, and I think that they will acquire some wisdom, but it will be desperately hard for them. When we lost Rosemary 10 years ago, and her memories returned to the people, they panicked. Those were such a few memories compared to yours. When your memories return, they'll need help. Remember how I helped you in the beginning when the receiving of memories was new to you? Jonas nodded. It was scary at first, and it hurt a lot. You needed me then, and now they will. It's no use. They'll find someone to take my place. They'll choose a new receiver. There's no one ready for training, not right away. Oh, they'll speed up the selection, of course, but I can't think of another child who has the right qualities. There's a little female with pale eyes, but she's only 6. That's correct. I know the one you mean. Her name is Catherine, but she's too young, so they will be forced to bear those memories. I want you to come, Jonas pleaded. No, I have to stay here, the giver said firmly. I want to, Jonas. If I go with you, and together we take away all their protection from the memories, Jonas, the community will be left with no one to help them. They'll be thrown into chaos. They'll destroy themselves. I can't go. Giver, Jonas suggested, you and I don't need to care about the rest of them. The giver looked at him with a questioning smile, and Jonas hung his head. Of course they needed to care. It was the meaning of everything. And in any case, Jonas, the giver sighed, I wouldn't make it. I'm so weakened now. Do you know that I no longer even see colors? Jonas's heart broke. He reached for the giver's hand. You have colors, the giver told him, and you have the courage, and I will help you to have the strength. A year ago, Jonas reminded him, when I had just become a 12, when I began to first see color, you told me that in the beginning that the beginning had been different for you, but that I wouldn't understand. The giver brightened. That's true. And do you know, Jonas, that with all the knowledge now, with all your memories, with all you've learned, still you won't understand. Because I've been a little selfish. I haven't given any of it to you. I wanted to keep it for myself to the last. Keep what? When I was just a boy, younger than you, it began to come to me. But it wasn't the seeing beyond for me. It was different. For me, it was hearing beyond. Jonas frowned to figure that out. What'd you hear? Music, the giver said, smiling. I began to hear something truly remarkable, and it's called music. I'll give you some before I go. Jonas shook his head empathetically. No, giver, he said, I want you to keep that, to have that with you when I'm gone. And we will stop there. So they have a plan. We have no idea what it is. But release is something horrible. Bye, guys.